Hello, today is Tuesday, July 6th, 2021. I'm Joe Schmidt from TC2, and this is Staying Connected. On our last podcast, TC2's technical director, David Lee, and I looked at WAN transport service levels, and we offered up some guidance on how to achieve meaningful WAN SLAs. But you may be asking, what about managed service level SLAs? Well, you're in luck because today I'm joined by Ben Fox, one of TC2's managing directors, and a guy who knows a thing or two about outsourcing and managed services SLAs. On today's podcast, Ben and I are going to help you understand SLA constructs and outsourcing and managed service deals. Hey, Ben, thanks for joining me. So why don't you start by illustrating the differences between the network transport SLAs that David and I discussed and SLAs in outsourcing and managed service deals?
Hello, Joe. Gosh, yeah, Dave's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best here. I would say that the most profound difference is that the service level constructs for managed services and outsourcing deals, they are far more custom to a particular contract or customer compared to network transport service levels. And that's really because outsourced and managed services are themselves custom built for an individual customer, whereas network circuits are largely a utility service that are built on the same network that's serving all of the supplier's customers. So the service levels for managed services are truly a key tenet of the managed services solution itself. So as an example of that, consider an outsourced contact center or an outsourced service desk. If the customer's SLA requirement is an ASA or an average speed to answer of 30 seconds, then the service provider will need to solution its service to have sufficient staff to answer calls within 30 seconds. So the shorter the SLA, the more staff required and the more expensive the service. So obviously not all service levels have quite that direct relationship between the service level and the solution and the cost, but certainly many do. And so specifying your required service levels is a really important part of your procurement and negotiation. So for instance, the SLAs should be very carefully specified in your RFP document.
You know, that's an interesting example that you just gave. In my experience, we often just worry about service levels that average performance over multiple events or service elements, like, averaging performance over multiple network circuit. And that, of course, undermines the service level. But in that ASA example that you gave, presumably you couldn't have service credits attached to each instance of a call not being answered in 30 seconds. So how do service levels and service credits work in those types of services?
That's a good question, and you're right. So the approach we've typically settled upon is that the service level metrics, so for instance, the time to answer the call to the contact center, or the time to resolve an incident, or time to deliver equipment, or indeed whatever, that has to be met for some percentage of the occurrences of such event during the measurement month, rather than measuring an average performance against that service level metrics. So, for instance, consider a service level covering time to resolve a P1 incident. The service level may be that the supplier will resolve the P1 incident within 4 hours for, say, 98% of P1s occurring in the month. So to make the maths easy, if there are 100 P1s in a month and the supplier resolved 98 of those 100 P1s within 4 hours, then the service level is deemed met. But if 3 or more P1s take longer than 4 hours to resolve, then the service level is missed. So by using that kind of pass-fail model, instead of just calculating an average P1 time to resolve, you largely avoid the issue of masking performance issues by averaging performance times. So in the example, the 3 misses are not averaged out by the 97 passes on the P1 resolution time.
All right. So that seems like an approach that could be used for a wide range of different types of service levels.
Yes, certainly can. I think we've incorporated pretty much any type of service level measurement you could think of into this kind of structure. So, standard metrics like incident resolution example I mentioned, time to deliver hardware, typical service desk metrics, time to complete root cause analysis, customer satisfaction metrics, change management metrics, time to perform MACDs, could go on all day. We've also been able to construct SLAs under this structure that measure continual services improvement metrics, such as ticket volume reductions over time and implementation of automation measures. So as I said at the start of the discussion, I think the beauty of service levels for outsourced services is that they are almost completely custom. So you should be developing service level metrics that genuinely underwrite the specific services you're contracting for. And I would say that the only real limitation, modest limitation of this approach is it doesn't work quite as well for measuring events that don't occur that frequently. So, for example, if you have a service level for server delivery that commits that 99% of service deliveries will be delivered on time each month, but you only buy 10 a month, then if only one delivery is late, the SLA would already be missed because 9 out of 10 is only 90%, which is below the 99% SLA. And what normally happens there is that the supplier requires that it can never be penalized or certainly pay a service credit if only a single event is missed. So regardless of the percentage, the service level metric is deemed met if there's only a single miss.
Okay, so what about service credits? What would enterprises typically see?
So the majority of service credit regimes in this space are so-called fees at risk models. And in a nutshell, the supplier puts a certain percentage of its monthly service fees into a bucket of potential service credits. And that bucket of service credits can then be allocated by the customer to the different service levels that are agreed in a contract. And if a particular service level is missed, then whatever portion of the bucket of service credits that was allocated that particular service level, that is what is paid to the customer as a service credit. And in these models, a percentage of monthly service fees that are, if you will, put at risk by the supplier, typically starts at 10 to 15% of the monthly charges and can be even higher. So the potential service credits can be quite significant. And usually another good feature of these arrangements is that they typically allow the customer to periodically adjust the allocation of the fees at risk between the different service levels. So this allows customers to really focus a supplier's attention on particular shortcomings or particularly important service levels, even as such priorities change and evolve over time.
So it seems that there's a lot to negotiate with service levels for outsourcing services, right? I mean, as you've just pointed out, everything is so custom. I guess, what are some of the more common key negotiation areas with suppliers?
Yeah, there's a few things that almost always come up, Joe. So, for instance, one common ask from the supplier is they want the ability to earn back the service credits that they paid out. So this is essentially the ability to recoup service credits that they've paid out for a service level miss when that same service level is met or perhaps exceeded over the following few months. And that tends to be a bit of a philosophical debate, really. The supplier will make the case that it's good, drives the right behaviors if they are incentivized, if you will, to correct past service level misses with improved performance going forward. But I must say that typically customers, they're not that motivated to pay back service credits simply because the supplier meets the SLA for a few months afterwards. Another common ask from suppliers is they want to have a burn-in period for the service levels. And what that really means is they don't want the service credits to apply for the first few months, or at the very least want the fees at risk to be lower to start. And my view is always in the spirit of accepting that there is usually some ramp-up time for a new service provider. It is appropriate for the customer to provide some flexibility in that area of a burn-in period. And then conversely, a common ask from suppliers is that the service levels should improve over time. And actually the easiest way to implement that is those percentage compliance levels to increase over the course of the contract. So if I use my earlier P1 resolution time example, the compliance level of 98% of P1s being resolved in 4 hours, that 98% might increase to 98.5%.
So Ben, what strikes me is with the level of customization that you've talked about, how do suppliers and customers actually measure all of these unique service levels?
So actually, Joe, I think you've hit on an area that can be a bit of a problem at times. I think when the customer and the supplier are developing the custom service levels, typically during a contract negotiation, there's an awful lot of energy around what the service levels should be, but sometimes exactly how they'll be measured just isn't given as much consideration. I'd certainly include myself as fallen into that trap in the past. So I think everyone assumes that the performance data for measuring whatever service levels are defined, that'll be easily extracted from ServiceNow or extracted from reporting tools that a supplier will bring to bear. But it often turns out to be much more complicated than that. So I actually think it's not necessarily practical to work out all of the nuances of measuring service levels during a contract negotiation. There's just not enough time. So instead, it's important to accept and actually expect that there will be a certain amount of post-contract adjustments to the agreed service levels, just to tweak things in light of any measurement tool shortcomings.
Okay, thanks, Ben. This has been a great discussion. Now, if you'd like to talk about any of the SLA concepts that we've covered, or you'd like to bounce some ideas off of Ben, me, or any of our colleagues at LB3 and TC2, or perhaps you just have some other ICT needs, please do drop us an email or give us a call. You can also stay up to date by subscribing to these Staying Connected podcasts by checking out our websites, and by following us on LinkedIn.